Welcome to the podcast, folks. We're diving into the deep and thought-provoking topic of communism, its historical roots, its promises, and the controversies surrounding it.
Yeah, absolutely. It all kicks off with Marx and Engels, who really laid down the ideas a long time ago. They envisioned a completely classless society where wealth isn't hoarded by a few, but shared collectively.
Yep, exactly. And one of the core maxims they introduced is from each according to ability to each according to need. It's like a promise that society would allocate resources based on what people truly require rather than on profit.
Right, and that idea directly arose from the harsh realities of industrial capitalism back in the day. Workers were, really squeezed, facing difficult conditions, while the factory owners accumulated massive wealth.
Yeah, it was a direct reaction to that inequality. Marx believed that once workers recognized their collective struggles, what we call class consciousness, they'd eventually overthrow the capitalist system.
Yep, that's the spark. And the theory saw communism as the final stage of societal evolution. So after capitalism and a transitional phase of socialism, you'd supposedly end up with a stateless society where, government interference would just vanish.
Exactly. The idea was to create a system where nobody owns major industries individually. Instead, these resources are controlled collectively to promote equity.
But, here's where it really gets interesting. When these ideas were implemented, especially in places like Russia in 1917, it wasn't exactly what Marx and Engels envisioned.
True indeed. Right. Lenin and the Bolsheviks, for instance, kick-started the first major communist revolution in Russia. They set up a socialist state aimed at transitioning towards this utopian vision.
And you had similar experiments later on with countries like China, Cuba, and Vietnam, each adopting their version of communism. Some argue these models pushed rapid industrialization and literacy, while others stress the downsides.
Exactly. Many supporters talked about how these systems reduced income inequality and boosted education. But then you had critics pointing out all the shortcomings, like, central planning, leading to severe inefficiencies and shortages.
Yeah, the whole coordination challenge is a big one. Without market price signals, governments found it really hard to allocate resources efficiently. This often meant bottlenecks and a lot of shortages.
Right. And politically, many of these states turned into single-party systems that concentrated power in the hands of a few leaders. It raises a critical question. Were these outcomes an inevitable consequence of communism, or were they shaped more by historical, geopolitical conditions?
That's a deep debate. I mean, I get the theory of a stateless, equal society, but you gotta say, when power consolidates like that, it often leads to restricted freedoms and sometimes even oppression.
Exactly. And that's a really fair point. And it's interesting how in the late 20th century, many of these communist economies started introducing market reforms to boost productivity and growth. China is the shining example here, a hybrid system that mixes state control with market mechanisms.
So, in a way, China reinterpreted communism to fit modern economic needs, combining centralized control with a dose of free market dynamism. But doesn't that kind of blur the original lines of pure communism?
That's exactly the discussion. Yeah, it makes you wonder, is communism as originally envisioned even viable in the modern world? Or have we seen that its influence is more about being an analytical framework for discussing inequality and labor rights, rather than a strict governing system?
It definitely seems that way. And while communism sparks vigorous debates about how to achieve true equality and efficiency, it also raises those fundamental questions. I mean, can a society really dispense with private ownership and still maintain economic efficiency?
Good question indeed. It's like trying to bake a cake without a secret ingredient already proven to work. It's complex, and historical attempts have shown that the theory and its practical attempts don't always align.
Exactly, yep. I get that, but then some might argue that the achievements made, like wide-scale education and healthcare, are proof of communism's potential when tailored to the community's needs. Yet, does that outweigh the downsides like restricted freedoms and economic planning issues?
Well, that's indeed the crux of the debate. Right. And it's fascinating how these debates persist even today, as communism remains influential in political theory. We still see it shape conversations about wealth distribution, economic equity, and labor rights in modern societies.
Absolutely. And what's striking is that despite these controversies, the legacy of communism continues to provoke critical thinking about what kind of society we aspire to create. It's almost like a mirror reflecting the tensions between ambition and practicality.
It really is. Thought-provoking. I agree. And while communism as a governing system might have morphed over time, its underlying questions, like can equality truly coexist with economic sustainability, remain deeply relevant.
Absolutely, yeah. It really makes you ask, where do we strike the balance between the idealism of a classless society and the reality of economic structures that rely on incentives, right?
Exactly, and that balance or lack thereof has defined global political conflicts for over a century. And let's not forget, these discussions aren't just academic. They influence the 20th century profoundly, from revolutions to policy reforms that then trickle down to today's debates on income inequality and social justice.
Indeed. It's a topic that, while rooted in history, continues to spark debates in boardrooms and policy forums even now. I mean, can we really learn from these past experiments to better address today's challenges?
That's the million-dollar question, for sure. Indeed, for sure. And as we unpack these ideas, it's clear that communism, whether as an economic model or a theoretical framework, forces us to consider what fairness really means in terms of resource distribution, human rights, and social progress.
Totally. Also, it's worth noting the shift over time. While earlier implementations were quite rigid, many modern iterations incorporate market dynamics, blending theory with a more pragmatic approach.
And as we think about the future, these discussions are not just about what was, but what could change in our approach to economic and political organization.
Yeah, truly intriguing. So before we wrap up, one final thought. As communism evolves from a historical movement to a framework for analyzing economic disparity, it continues to remind us that the quest for equality is as much about idealism as it is about practical policy.
Absolutely. That's spot on. Exactly. And with that, we've journeyed through the origins, the evolution, and the enduring debates that surround communism. It's a topic that provokes deep reflection on social justice and economic efficiency.
No doubt about it. Thanks for tuning in to this exploration. Stay curious, keep questioning the old versus the new, and until next time, let's keep the conversation alive.
Right on. Catch you on the next episode, where we dive into how global power expansion reshaped modern political systems. Cheers, everyone.